Welcome to The Explainer. Today we are unpacking a truly wild chronological timeline from our source material. We're going to explore how a severely bullied kid, with basically no friends to speak of, transformed an extreme reliance on logic and a massive appetite for personal risk into one of the most expansive multi-billion-dollar empires in human history. We're diving deep into the mechanics of how Elon Musk literally re-engineered the future. All right, let's jump right into this timeline, taking it all the way back to 1984. We've got a socially isolated boy in South Africa who found his absolute refuge in early technology. At just 10 years old, he gets his hands on a computer with a mere 5 kilobytes of memory and a basic programming book. Now, normally, that book takes people about 6 months to get through. He completely mastered it in just 3 days, going entirely without sleep. By the time he was 12, he had coded a space shooter game called Blaster and sold it for $500. This was technically his very first business venture. Now, this early anecdote right here perfectly captures his hyper-logical worldview. Once, when they were playing at night, his cousins complained that they were afraid of the dark. But instead of offering, typical childhood comfort, his immediate response was grounded in cold, unarguable physics. He just told them, darkness is just the absence of light. He approached literally everything with facts and logic, but sadly that alienated him from other kids, leading to some really severe bullying, including one horrific incident where he was thrown down a flight of stairs and beaten so badly he actually had to be hospitalized. So, how do you cope with that? Well, to process his insatiable curiosity, which was fed by constantly reading encyclopedias and sci-fi, he developed this very unique mental habit. He would fall into what we can call supercomputer trances. He would completely disconnect from his physical surroundings. Actually, his parents and doctors initially suspected he had hearing loss. But as it turned out, his brain was just organized differently. In those silent moments, his mind was functioning like a highly focused internal science lab, visualizing super complex systems in complete isolation. By the time he hit high school, he knew his capabilities required a much bigger stage. He was firmly convinced that only the United States could properly recognize and foster his potential. So he executed a calculated move. At age 17, leveraging his relative's citizenship, he relocated from South Africa to Canada and took on odd jobs. He eventually enrolled at Queen's University and then, 2 years later, made his strategic transfer to the University of Pennsylvania in the U.S. He was setting the geographical groundwork for his entire entrepreneurial journey. Section 1. Disrupting the old guards. Let's look at how he actually put this logic into practice. The year is 1995. The internet is just starting to blow up, but local businesses are still completely stuck in the past, entirely reliant on paper directories and physical maps. Right out of college, he and his brother Kimball rented a tiny apartment to build Zip2. Elon coded day and night, while Kimball pitched the software to local stores. It was a massive disruption to those slow, paper-based incumbents, and that logic paid off perfectly. In 1999, Compaq bought Zip2, and Musk walked away with $22 million in shares. He was a multimillionaire at just 27 years old. Now, most people would just take that money and retire on a beach somewhere, right? Not him. He thought back to an internship he once had at a traditional bank. He remembered how incredibly slow and outdated the banking industry was. So he decided to put his brand new wealth on the line to make banking, payments, savings, loans entirely digital. And in 1999, he launched X.com. And this brilliantly illustrates his data-driven growth strategy. Think about it. At the time, the public deeply distrusted online shopping, let alone online banking. To overcome that massive friction point, he didn't just run traditional ads. He aggressively paid for user acquisition. He literally gave out $20 for free to new users and $10 for referrals. The result? X.com secured an unbelievable 200,000 users in just 2 months. However, massive growth brought massive competition, specifically from a young entrepreneur named Peter Thiel and his company PayPal. They were burning millions fighting each other, so they logically decided to merge, with Musk as the largest shareholder and CEO. But growth also brought intense internal friction. The sources note he was known for a harsh, micromanaging culture, often publicly reprimanding employees. The friction got so intense that while he was away in Australia on his honeymoon, the board of directors officially ousted him as CEO, replacing him with Thiel. Section 2. The ultimate space risk. Even though he lost control of PayPal, he kept his shares. So when eBay bought the company in 2002, Musk walked away with $180 million. But right at this peak of financial success, a profound personal tragedy struck. the devastating loss of his 2.5-month-old infant son. Looking for an outlet for his grief, he threw himself completely into his oldest childhood fascination, space, and specifically Mars. But he looked at the major space incumbents and just saw stagnation. He checked NASA's website and was stunned to find they had no concrete plans to go to Mars. He even flew to Russia to try and buy modified ballistic missiles to use as rockets. But the Russian merchants basically mocked him and refused to take him seriously. Rejected by the old guard, he returned to his foundational logic to disrupt aerospace entirely. So picture him on this commercial flight back from Russia just doing the math. He broke down a rocket into its fundamental parts. Visualizing the materials, he realized that the raw materials, the aerospace-grade aluminum, titanium, copper, and carbon fiber, accounted for only 2 to 3% of a rocket's total cost. To put that into perspective, it's like realizing a $100 bakery cake only cost $3 in flour and eggs to make yourself. The rest of the cost was just bloated incumbent overhead. He realized he could bypass them completely, build the rockets in-house, and founded SpaceX in 2002 to build the world's cheapest and fastest rockets. Which brings us to Section 3, the 2008 collapse. He hired top engineers from NASA and Boeing, converted a giant warehouse into a modern rocket factory, and got to work. But by 2008, the global economic recession hit, and Musk found himself staring down the barrel of total bankruptcy for both SpaceX and his new electric sports car startup, Tesla, which he had heavily invested in and become CEO of. Because building rockets is insanely hard, SpaceX's Falcon 1 launched and failed. The second launch failed. The third launch failed again. $100 million had literally gone up in smoke. They only had enough money left for one final do-or-die fourth launch. At the exact same time, Tesla was out of cash. Normal business logic would dictate that an executive should cut their losses, let one company die, and try to save the other. But Musk's unprecedented appetite for extreme personal risk kicked in. He refused to let either die. He sold off his luxury cars, liquidated his personal property, and funneled absolutely every last cent he had to fund both Tesla and SpaceX simultaneously. Section 4. Re-engineering the future. That gamble was absolutely historic. In December 2008, everyone held their breath as the fourth Falcon 1 rocket successfully reached orbit, making SpaceX the first private company to ever achieve this. Just weeks later, NASA awarded SpaceX a massive $1.6 billion contract. Over at Tesla, last-minute funding was secured just in the nick of time. Both companies were saved, allowing him to shift his focus to fully re-engineering how the world drives. See, prior to this, automotive incumbents had conditioned the public to believe that electric cars were just slow, ugly, boring golf carts. Musk disrupted this completely, first with the Roadster and then decisively in 2012 with the Model S. He proved that moving away from petrol didn't mean sacrificing performance. With its giant touchscreen and over-the-air software updates, the Model S wasn't just a car, it was a fast, stylish computer on wheels, and it forced the entire stagnant automobile industry to completely reinvent itself. Now, as an objective explainer, we have to look at the whole picture. While his success is undeniable, so is his highly controversial nature. The sources highlight a strict, highly demanding work culture, frequently cited by employees at both SpaceX and Tesla. Over at Twitter, his acquisition immediately resulted in mass layoffs, and his unfiltered, personal social media posts frequently cause massive, chaotic fluctuations in the global stock market. Yet, despite those intense controversies and friction points, the staggering scale of his current empire today is just undeniable. From building reusable rockets with SpaceX, beaming global internet through Starlink, attempting to merge the human brain with computers via Neuralink, developing artificial intelligence with XAI, all the way to owning the massive social network X, that isolated, bullied kid coding in his bedroom is now actively shaping the everyday technology of human civilization. Whether you absolutely love his approach or hate his methods, you simply cannot ignore his massive impact on the world. He proves that relying on first principles logic and taking massive personal risks can completely dismantle outdated systems. Which leaves us with a final thought to ponder. Are you content to just wait for the future to arrive? Or are you going to step up and build it yourself?